Hello again, everyone. I'm back with another comparison video. This is between the MacBook Air 15-inch and the MacBook Pro 14-inch. Now, I will say from the beginning, just as I said with the comparison between the 15 and the 16 that I did earlier, if you need the power, but you want it in a somewhat smaller footprint than the 16, then the MacBook Pro is the way to go. However, it's a much more complicated decision this year with the M4 chips because there are more options for the Pro model with the M4 chip. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep it there at the M4 selection there, not the M4 Pro. Obviously, if you need the power, you're going to go Pro or you're going to go Max. But if you are going for the M4 chip, which, depending upon what your configuration is, you may or may not choose, then it becomes a much more complicated decision. Now, obviously, you can use this as a general comparison for older models as well. If you want to opt to get something older, something used, you can definitely save a lot more money that way. So just also keep that in mind. The other thing is that the MacBook Airs will go on sale, for a pretty substantial discount. So right now in the United States, at Best Buy, for example, or Amazon, you could actually pick up a MacBook Air base model for about $850, which is $150 less than retail price. You can also pick up, I've seen the MacBook Pro 14-inch, the M4 version, right, for $13.99. So again, it kind of just depends on what you're looking for and how much you're willing to spend. But the base model differential here is $400. So that's pretty significant. Now, once you start to spec it up, you'll notice that with the MacBook Air, if you go to 512 SSD storage and 16 gigabytes of RAM, then you're only $200 off from the base model from the 14. So, Apple does the thing where they kind of lure you in and they're just kind of roping you along and seeing where you end up, okay? So, in terms of just, from my perspective, again, it's someone who does mostly office work, and that's primarily, what I use it for. Obviously, if you want the larger screen, but you don't want the heavy footprint of the 16-inch Pro, which is lurking in the back over there, you definitely want to go with the Air, okay? Because this screen size, for me personally, to do two documents side by side, it doesn't really work that great. It's too small. That, again, that's just my perspective. Maybe, that works for you. I think this is even pushing it a little bit. I had a Microsoft Surface Laptop 15. Because of the aspect ratio, it was actually really good for documents side by side. The Air, I prefer obviously the 16 to do that. However, I'm moving towards a desktop setup along with the iPad. But the Air is just enough space to get two documents side by side. So again, if you do that kind of work, then that's something you want to think about. You're going to have it doesn't seem like a much larger screen. It's only a little bit larger, but as it makes a big difference. Like, it's just wider, it's taller. It just feels like it's just the right size for two documents. That's what you do. This is very much a focused one document type device. You may prefer that though, so that's something to think about. This is obviously thinner, right? So you see like the side-by-side footprint, it's much thinner. It's smaller, it feels lighter. So, that's the other thing, that if you want something more portable, you can even go more portable with the 13, but the 15 I think is kind of where I would draw the line in terms of size. Now, this was given to me at work, which is why I have it. I wouldn't have purchased this otherwise, just because of the size itself. My decision would be more between the 15 and the 16. That being said, though, this is a very common kind of decision people have to make, because you may want the bells and whistles of the Pro, especially if you need the ports, right? So obviously one of the big differences here is you're going to get the two USB-C ports, right? You're going to get the, obviously the proprietary port charger. You have the headphone jack. And then on the other side, you're going to get the SD card slot, another a USB-C port, and you're going to get the HDMI port. This is literally why work gives these out, because of this port here. When we're obviously lecturing in the classroom, we need that to connect to the larger system. Here, as with every other Air, you're going to get two ports, and they're going to be on one side, and it's not going to be as useful. in that way. Now, if you don't need the ports, then that's fine. This is more about, I think, kind of the size comparison here. Obviously, this is a much smaller thing, but device. But this, again, is a powerhouse. As small of a powerhouse as you're going to get, unless you get like a studio or something, a desktop setup. Now, so again, this is a little bit thinner. It feels lighter as well. This feels a little more of a thick, kind of brickish type of feel to it, even though they're not really that much apart in terms of actual weight. But it's like with everything else, if it's a little more spread out, you're gonna feel it a little heavier on this side. In terms of the battery, well, supposedly this gets more battery life. I'm not really seeing it, but then again, I jack up the brightness on this way more. And then as with my other Pro, the 16-inch, I have Vivid. So you turn Vivid on and it jacks it up even more, right? So you can make this go really, really bright if you want, okay? It just depends on what you're looking for. That's pretty much maxed out. But you can definitely see a major difference in the brightness. So if that's a factor for you, then obviously the Pro might be an option. Nothing wrong with this screen, but this screen is on a different level. So you're paying for the hardware difference as well. Now, again, it's more complicated this year because of the M4 chip. You're getting the same chip, right? You're getting the same core CPUs at the base model level for the 14. Now, obviously, if you go up to the Pro level chip, then you're going to get a little more performance. I'm not sure if that's really worth it. It depends what you do, right? For basic tasks, though, this is going to be more about, do you want the bells and whistles, but in a smaller, kind of form factor, but you don't want to pay 16-inch prices? Or do you want, something that's a little bit bigger, a little bit thinner, a little bit lighter, that kind of thing, right? So it depends. Because again, once you get up to like 24 gigabytes of RAM here and 512 SSD, you're at $1599, which is the base model here. So do you want the nicer screen and all the ports? Or do you want a little bit more RAM? So again, once you start to spec it up, you're really close in terms of making a decision, having to make a decision based on certain kinds of things, right? So it just, again, it just depends. The other thing that's different, like as with the 16-inch and as I mentioned before, the camera is much better here. The audio filtration, when you do video work, when you're on Zoom, if you're doing any kind of creation, this is studio microphones, right? So this is not. This is, the camera's better now with the M4. Might have the M2. This is potato cam territory. But this setup here in terms of audio, in terms of video, all of it, this is a much better option. So, that's another thing to think about. Again, as I mentioned in my other video, something can be going on in the background and my students will not hear it on Zoom when I'm on this computer here. They'll hear it here, okay? So if you value that, that might be an option as well. The other thing is that this does not have a fan, so it doesn't make noise, but it will heat up a little bit more often, I notice, even more so than this. Now, if you're pushing this will heat up more than the 16, but it takes a while to get that going. So very rarely have I really pushed it that hard. So this does have active, fan. It has a cooling system. So again, if you're going to do a little bit more heavy duty work, then the Pro is the way to go. Oh, I rhymed there, huh? Hashtag bars. Is that what Flossie says? Anyway, so there's that. I think that overall, and the typing experience. So as I like to mention personally, I find the typing experience much better on the Air, than the 15-inch Air. Although I will say that this is a little more comfortable than typing on the 16-inch Pro, the 14-inch Pro, because it's not as large. You don't have to reach as much. There's not as much space, it feels like. Whereas now there's a little bit more space between the keys and the trackpad is bigger here as well. There's now more space between the keys and kind of this bezel here with the trackpad than there is here. So this is actually more even of a typing experience. Whereas I felt like the 16-inch Pro, it's a much harder typing experience. Because it's kind of far and it's kind of big and, it's also taller. This isn't as bad. because it's a smaller footprint. So I actually find them more even than I do the larger Pro model. So if for whatever that's worth, for those of you who do a lot of typing as well, right? I don't know if anyone types anymore. Everyone uses some kind of AI thing, but it is what it is. Okay, so the other thing too is let's test the speakers out. So I tested them last time. We'll do some copyright-free music here. Lost Sky Dreams. This is Trap, I guess. So we'll go ahead and play. This is the Air. So let's max it out. Well, I'll max it out. Yeah, I'll max it out here. So this is what it sounds like. Okay. So we'll go max volume here on this one here now. That was the Air. This is the Pro. Let me max out the volume. Get the brightness back up. Whoops, I accidentally went the wrong way there. Let's see, it was 228. I think we'll be all right wherever we go. Okay, let's try a little bit more. Okay, there we go. That's good enough. So back again, Air. Pro. So again, just like with the 16, it's not quite as deep and bassy with the 14, but it still blows away the Air. It's just way nicer. Now the speakers aren't it's not as much space to work with, so it doesn't quite sound on par with the 16-inch, but the Air does not compare. I mean, this is not really a conversation here. So kind of, again, the bells and whistles, the speakers, the screen, the ports, does that stuff, is that what you value? Then you might want to opt for the Pro. Now, if you're doing it on the cheap, again, you can get for pretty cheap. I'm comparing the 15-inch. So I've seen the 15-inch as low as $1049 right now, or I think $1020 at Micro Center. The 13-inch you can get for $850. So, $850 for the base model 13 is hecka cheap if you're good with the screen size. At that point, you may as well just go for it if you're trying to save money, because that's literally almost half the price. Now, I've seen these down to $13.99, but that's $13.99, $850 for a 13-inch versus a 14-inch Pro. But when you get to the 15-inch, that's when I think it's a little bit more of a tougher go. Now, again, $1020 versus $13.99, that's still a good amount of difference. But once you start to spec it up, the difference, you get closer to the base model here. Now you're $13.99, $15.99. You're only $200 apart, and with the extras that you get here, I think that's where the decision kind of has to be made, right? If you're okay with the screen size. So, it's kind of a tough call. I personally, I don't necessarily, I mean, this is barely enough to do the two screen side-by-side thing. So if I'm making that decision, I probably would opt, once I start speccing it up, I would probably opt for the Pro. But if I'm doing it on the cheap and I'm just trying to get into, a 15-inch laptop for $1,200 or, $1049 on sale, $1020 on sale, you can get even an older used one for even cheaper, then this is a really good large size laptop for the money in terms of, if you want to obviously get a MacBook. So it's a tough call. I'm still kind of debating myself what I would do. Now, obviously, again, this is a work computer, so I'm fine with it. But, I think it just depends on what your preference is. They're both great though, regardless. I'm not hating on any one of them. Personally, I'm going to keep this obviously because it's something I can use. I'm probably going to move on from the Pro and the Air that I personally have, and actually going to try a larger screen setup. So I'll be unboxing a Mac Mini soon, and I'm going to roll with that for a little bit. Okay, well, that's all I got for now. I hope you're well. I hope your family's well, and take care of yourself.